With all the different shades, colors, and styles of brass here, it's difficult to tell the difference between what's red brass, what's yellow brass, what attachments can be left on it, what attachments can be left inside of it. So in this video, I'm going to show exactly how to figure out the difference and explain to you what can be left in it and on it. I'm also going to show you the difference between chrome-plated brass and stainless. To make the most money when you're scrapping brass, you're going to want to separate the red brass from the yellow brass. The easiest way to tell the difference between the two is to scuff up the metal and scrape through it. You can do this by scraping it with a file here, or you can hit them with a grinder real quick. Now that they're all scuffed up and laid out on the bench here, I can show you the difference between them. Here's the brass without showing any of the grinded marks on it. But once it's grinded, the brass's true colors come out. And their colors are much more prominent when you have a very yellow piece and a very red piece next to each other. You can really see the difference between the yellow and the goldish in here, and the red and the copperish look in here. I found that it works best to have a piece that's very yellow as well as a piece that's very red on hand. That way you can use it to compare differences between the different pieces of brass you have. So if we pick this piece up here to see if it was yellow or red brass, we could hold it next to this piece, which we can clearly see is much more red, and this has more of a yellow or goldish look. And then we compare it to our one that we already know is yellow, and it definitely has more resemblances to that. So this is going to go into our yellow brass pile. We'll take another piece here and take a look at that. That has close resemblances, but let's see how it looks next to a red. I would say it definitely leans more towards the yellow brass, so we would put that there. Something like this is a little more prominent. It's definitely going to favor the red brass side, and we can test it next to our yellow, and we can see from there that this definitely has more of an orangish, copperish look to it, and this has more of a yellow, goldish look to it. So this is yellow and this is red, so we'll put that in the red brass pile. And we just work our way around piece by piece comparing them, and this one we can see is definitely on the red brass side, so that's another piece of red brass. And then we go to this one here. This one looks pretty close to that, but this is definitely more reddish or coppery looking, and this is more silver or orangey looking. But when we look at it next to a piece that's definitely yellow, we can see it has more of that different hint. It definitely doesn't look yellow or gold. So we're going to put that in our red brass pile. And we're just going to keep moving on to each piece, seeing which one looks closer. That would be yellow brass. This one here, another one. When you compare it next to something red, it definitely is known, but when you compare it next to this, it's easier to tell which is which, so that would be another yellow brass. Here we have this one is definitely lighter, but how does it compare to this? It could almost be a toss-up, but I would put that into your yellow brass. These you can also tell are definitely, it's harder to tell in the light, but this is yellow and this is also yellow, and we can tell more when we compare it to this yellow because they look closer to each other. When you hold it next to each other, they have a closer resemblance to yellow than they would holding it next to the red. You can tell here on the chrome plated as well as the satin plated which ones are yellow brass, because when you grind them through you can clearly see that they look yellow or goldish. And then when you get down to these, you can see that these are clearly silver. Even though they have that copperish tint to it, it's still silver once you grind it down. When you grind it down, you can really see what it is. When it comes to attachments and contaminants, if it has copper in it and even solder, that's actually okay to keep it as clean brass. But if it has any steel attached to it at all, you're going to have to remove that in order for it to be clean brass. As far as these styles go, this pressure relief valve does have steel in it, so that would have to come out in order for it to become clean brass. And if you have these type of relief valves which are sealed, check out my video on how to scrap pressure relief valves to see how to clean them. They'll usually allow thin plastic or rubber seals to stay on and still count it as clean brass, and even allow thicker rubber grommets to stay on and count it as clean brass, as long as you don't have any steel or other attachments inside of it or on it. Here's some more examples on contaminants and attachments. This would be considered clean brass even though it has this attachment on it, because the copper is worth more than the brass once it's separated. So if we take the copper off, we have a piece of clean brass here as well as a piece of copper, which we can also cut right here to have number 2 copper here and number 1 copper here to maximize our scrap value. For this piece here, this should be considered clean brass even though it does have the solder contaminant here and the screw-on attachment here. It only has a thin plastic or rubber grommet here, so they should consider this as clean brass as it is. This here will be clean brass as it is once we unscrew the screw here as well as the knob on the top here, which is usually aluminum or steel. Then we're just left with brass with a little rubber grommet here and a little rubber grommet here, which they should accept as clean brass. This one is the same. It has a rubber grommet here and a rubber grommet on the inside here. Even though it has this thin stainless washer, they'll still generally accept this as clean brass as it is. This one would be clean brass as it is as well, even though it has some copper and some solder, and it has the grommet here and the grommet here. Everything is brass, so they'll accept this as clean brass as well. For these two here, the knobs on here or the handles, this has an aluminum nut and aluminum handle, so we'd want to take this off. This plastic piece can stay and it's considered clean brass. And this here has a steel nut as well as a steel handle. So once we remove this, this is brass and the ball inside here is brass, so this would be considered clean brass as well. Since the balls inside of these ball valves are chrome plated yellow brass, if you had any red brass ball valves, that would actually lower the value of your red brass down to yellow brass, since the ball inside it is chrome plated yellow brass. So in order to maximize your scrap value, if you had any red brass ball valves, you'd want to unscrew the front here, remove it from the ball valve to open it up and remove the ball. After that, you would be able to separate your yellow brass from your red brass and maximize your scrap value. The way that it works with these attachments and contaminants is they're going to give you the price for whatever the lowest priced metal that's attached to it is. So if you have steel attached to here, some scrap yards will just give you steel price for it. Or if you have aluminum attached to it, you'll get aluminum price. So you want to make sure it's as clean as possible from any types of metals that would cause it to lower the value. As long as you clean them like this, you'll get top dollar for your brass. And if you remove your copper, you'll get top dollar for that as well. If this helped you out at all, please let me know in the comments and